Hello everyone, we are Group 12. The topic we discuss are alternative form of learning beyond traditional school, distance learning. The content of our presentation mainly include 4 parts: background, example, question, and conclusion. This is the outline of our presentation. We will first explain to you what distance learning is, and then talk about the distance learning under the COVID-19. Distance learning means online course. I believe everyone is familiar with it because we are now in distance learning. So, is distance learning only emerging now? What is its specific definition? According to the article, distance learning and its impact on student creativity material, a practical experience for students of the Christmas Brigade from Science Direct. Distance learning is a kind of virtual educational environment that connects teacher and learner with the support of communication technology and the internet. Digital chemical that can provide distance learning include mobile phone, computer, digital library, and so on. And these digital tools all need a network to connect. In addition, this article also mentioned that distance learning is not new. In a broad sense, distance learning appeared in the US and Europe about 123 years ago. It can be said that distance learning has a certain history. But judging from the current development of education, distance learning is not popular. Distance learning is truly prevalent from 2020. Due to the impact of COVID-19, many cultures have suspended traditional face-to-face classroom and started remote learning models in order to stop the spread of the virus. Picture 1 we can see now shows the global spread of COVID-19. Picture 2 shows that schools in many countries has been closed due to the impact of COVID-19. Among them, 128 million learners out of school. 17 cultures affected by school closure. 7.3% of the world student population affected by school closure. Affected by COVID-19, schools have to suspend class in order to achieve sustainable development of education. Country has called for suspension of class and non-stop. In this case, distance learning is adapted by various schools because it is not restricted by time and space. The chart we see now is the selection of equipment for distance learning on all continents during the epidemic periods collected by the United Nations. From the table, we can find that most of them choose online and television for distance learning.
I'm Qingzhi. Based on the previous background and actual situation, distance learning is necessary. First, because the COVID-19 is very contagious and the population movement will increase the risk of infection. Many countries have taken relevant measures to reduce population movements. Take China as an example. During the severe epidemic, China clearly stated that it couldn't leave the province unless necessary, and the Ministry of Education also issued a national notice of suspension of classes. Secondly, it is in response to the policy of suspension of classes and no stopping of learning, so that education can achieve sustainable development. It can be said that during the epidemic period, distance learning is necessary. However, distance learning has deepened the digital divide in education and make the problem of unequal educational resource more prominent. The following example reflects this problem. This Chinese girl named Yang Xiuhua lived in a small mountainous area in Sichuan province. During the online class, she worked for 30 minutes every day to find a signal to study in the mountains, because there was no internet in her home. It can be said that Yang Xiuhua is a student at the bottom of the digital divide. In fact, many students like Yang Xiuhua are dragged into the bottom of the digital divide because they are in mountainous areas and don't have enough resources. And myself, like Yang Xiuhua, is at the bottom of the digital divide. In the first half of 2020, the University of Macau launched online course in response to the national policy. At that time, I was in a small village in Chongjiang, Guizhou, my hometown. The basic conditions in the village were not good. Therefore, it was very difficult for me to learn online. I remember at that time when my classmates in the city were listening to the class normally, I was distressed because I couldn't receive the signal. I come from a mountainous area, so I can feel the helplessness of the children in the mountainous area. I know that some children in the mountainous area have no tools for online classes, and they are unable to struggle in the bottom of the digital divide. The same situation is also reflected in Nigeria. According to the article Who Get to Learn in a Pandemic, reporting the digital divide in remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria from Science Direct. The internet penetration rate in Nigeria is 42%, which means that more than half of Nigeria's population is not connected to the internet. The article also mentioned that after COVID-19, the education system transitioned to a new learning method assisted by the internet, which means that children from poor socio-economic backgrounds are excluded from the digital transition because they have difficulty accessing the internet and digital tools. This is the digital divide present by distance learning under the epidemic. This phenomenon not only found in China and Nigeria, but also in other countries. In the case of uneven economic development and unequal educational resources, this phenomenon can be said to be the commonality of global education. After you have certain understanding of distance learning, you will find that distance learning has a certain degree of duality. It is popular nowadays by virtue of its advantage of not being restricted by time and space, but it also makes the unfairness of education more prominent due to the unbalanced development. So, based on your learning experience, do you think distance learning will replace traditional face-to-face classroom? In response to this question, we interviewed some classmates and teachers. Below is our interview presentation. The first interviewee is a junior student in the Department of Communication. She believes that distance learning will not replace traditional face-to-face learning because she feels that distance learning cannot learn anything. The second interviewee is a senior student with a major in economics. She also believes that distance learning will not replace face-to-face learning because distance learning lacks interaction and doesn't have a good learning atmosphere. And the third interviewee is a professor from the country of education. This professor mainly studied the sociology of education. Faced with this question, her response is that distance learning will not replace face-to-face learning. Distance learning focuses on knowledge transfer, but the goal of education is to focus on the coordinated development of students' cognition, affection, and skills. However, in terms of affection, distance learning cannot be achieved. In addition, distance learning has very high requirements for student learning motivation. Not all students are suitable for distance learning. The fourth interviewee is a senior student who majors in Chinese education. Now let's take a look at her views through the video.
你好，我们现在正处于远程学习之中。那么，作为未来老师的你认为远程学习会取代面授课堂吗？
我觉得是不会取代面授课堂哦，因为网课其实不能照顾到学生认知情意情感的一个全面发展。那就比如说，他们可能会缺乏一个社交锻炼和情绪控制的一个机会，就不利于他们全人发展。
In general, the four interviewees agree that distance learning will not replace face-to-face classroom, and I personally think that face-to-face classroom will not be replaced by distance learning. Distance learning is a way of learning outside of traditional education. It involves the problem of education, cultural population mobility, and economic development imbalance in globalization. It promotes the sharing of global education resources and makes it possible for education to face the world. However, in the case of unbalanced global development and the unbalanced development of the country itself, distance learning will widen the digital divide in education. In addition, the sharing of global educational resources will also bring cultural coalitions. It can be said that distance learning has made up for the shortcomings of traditional face-to-face classroom, but the goal of education is to allow students to develop coordinated development in three aspects: cognition, affection, and skills. Education is to train a person with all-round development, which cannot be achieved by distance learning. Therefore, distance learning will not replace face-to-face classroom. The above is our report. Thank you.
数字鸿沟是信息时代的全球问题，不仅是一个国家内部不同人群对信息技术拥有程度、应用程度和创新能力差异造成的社会分化问题，而且更为尖锐的是，全球数字化进程中，不同国家因信息产业、信息经济发展程度不同所造成的信息时代的南北问题，其实质是信息时代的社会公正问题。